Hi, fourth graders, it's Miss Leon. We are going to go ahead and talk about our next text structure, which is compare and contrast. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can go ahead and look at this. So the compare and contrast text structure, the intention or what the author is trying to do is to take at least two, but maybe more than two things and talk about how they are similar and how they are different. We can use a couple different organizers to help us find these details. One organizer we can use is the Venn diagram, where you have two topics, topic A and topic B. And the center where they intersect is where you would talk about how these two things are similar. And on the outsides, you can talk about how they are different. We have a matrix here where you can talk about more than two things that are being compared, and you can talk about their attributes and how some of these attributes are the same or different depending on what those topics are about. So I'm going to go back to the beginning page and say compare and contrast. They talk about similarities and differences, and here are some of the clue words that can be used to help us know that we're reading a compare and contrast text structure. And also I'm showing again that a Venn diagram is one of those possible ways to map out or take notes on that kind of text structure. Let's go ahead and look at the passage and try one together. The first thing that we're going to do is read the passage, but then after that, we're going to need to mark the clue words to help us know that yes, in fact, we are reading a compare and contrast text structure. So here's our passage. A canoe and a sailboat are two different kinds of water transportation people use for fun. Both are small enough for people to move them from their homes to the lake or river where they can be put into the water. A canoe is usually small, but a sailboat can be large or small or large. The main difference between the two is the way they get power to move them in the water. The canoe must have at least one person that moves paddles in the water to push it along. Some canoes used teams of people to move many paddles at the same time so they would move much faster. In contrast, sailboats need people to put big pieces of cloth called sails up on big poles so the wind can blow into the sails and move the boat. The more sails a boat has, the faster it can move. The people on the sailboat must move sails around so the wind can blow into them. These are very different ways to move in the water, but it is important to remember that both canoes and sailboats need people to make the best use of power. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to mark the clue words in the text. Okay, so I'm going to go along and start highlighting these. I see right here the words two different kind of water transportation people use for fun. Then on this line, I see the word both. Both are small enough for people to move from their homes or lakes where they can be put in water. A canoe is usually small, but a sailboat can be small or large. I'm going to use the word but because it's one of those words that can show how things are different. The main difference, that's the next one, difference between the two is the way that they get power to move them in water. A canoe must have at least one person in the water to push along. Some canoes use teams of people to move paddles at the same time, but they could also move much faster. In contrast, that's the next one. In contrast, sailboats need people to put big pieces of cloth called sails up on big poles so the wind can blow into the sails to move the boat. The more sails the boat has, the faster it can move. The people On the sailboat must move the sails around so the wind can blow into them. These are very different ways. That's the one, different, to move on the water, but it's important to remember that both, that's the next one, canoes and sailboats need people to make the best use of power. So I think, yes, that this is a compare and contrast. The next thing is we're going to determine which two things we're comparing. And as I'm seeing back and forth, it's a canoe and a sailboat. So I'm going to go ahead and label my Venn diagram right here, canoe for one. And then for the next one, a sailboat on the other side. Now we're going to have to go line by line, and we're going to have to start adding the details that make them the same and the different. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start sorting information into the categories it belongs into. So it says a canoe and sailboat are two different kinds of water transportation people use for fun. Both are small enough for people to move. So they're both water transportation. Both of them are small enough for people to move from the house to the water. A canoe is small, but a sailboat can be small or large. So a canoe is usually small, but a sailboat could be either large or small. The main difference between the two is the way they get power to move them in the water. A canoe must at least have one person that moves the paddles in the water to push it along. Some canoes use teams of people so that they can paddle at the same time. In contrast, sailboats need to put big pieces of cloth called sails up on big poles. So they need people to put up the sails. And then it says that the more sails it has, the faster it can be used. And that people on a sailboat must move the sails around so the wind can blow into them. So the wind is powering it. The people on the sailboat must move the sails around. These are different ways to move in the water, but it is important that both of them need people to make use of the power. So this is how we would use a Venn diagram to help us map out the similarities and differences in a compare and contrast text structure. I want you to go ahead and we're going to try this again with a different text.